So hello and welcome to session 7 of the Talking Asperger's with Andrew weekly Zoom call. It's great to have you all here. Thank you very much for coming along. And seeing as we all know each other, I think we might as well just get straight into what I was going to talk about today. And that is one of the key skills that some people with Asperger's have. It's one of the positive traits that some people on the spectrum have, and that is visual skills. They're very visual and they learn very visually. And probably the best way to explain how that manifests in me is to give you an example. I used to be a geologist in the construction industry, and so we would have drawings of the site and we would put lots of information on them that we get, historical information, whether there used to be an ironworks on part of the site, or whether part of the site was the stables, or all sorts of historical information and other things that you found out about from looking at the site, walking over. Were there areas of soft ground? Was there marshy ground? All these sorts of little pieces of information that's useful to know. So I would just set it all out on this one master drawing to have all the relevant information to show myself, so that I could look for patterns and get an idea of the sense of the feel for the site. And when my bosses would say to me, okay, Andrew, so what's going on this site? I had one drawing. I could point to various aspects of the site, difficult areas of ground, or good block exposures that might be suitable for using for materials to build the road with, or all sorts of things like that. And so to me, it was presenting it visually on one surface, rather like a battlefield commander would have his men and his tanks and all his artillery laid out on a desk in front of him so that he could see the battlefield and where everyone was. That was my battlefield, was to have a drawing marked up so that I could see where everything was. And that helped me understand the site. It helped me get familiar with what was going on, but it also enabled me to communicate that to other people. So it wasn't just for my purposes, it was being able to show my boss or other people or other colleagues, civil engineers or structural engineers or directors, this is the nuts and bolts of the site. These are the issues. These are the good points, the plus points. And these are some of the areas of concern that we need to look at in more detail when we investigate and when we study the site in more detail. So that's how I am visually. And one of the other ones is I'm always very organized. And I may have said this before on an earlier session, but I could know as a child if someone had been in my bedroom and had borrowed a book or an album or a CD, because I would know that it didn't feel right, it didn't look right. I just have to scan the room. Just instantly that I walked in, I would know if someone had been in and touched something of mine. Because I had this sort of sense of spatial awareness of where everything was. And it helped me enormously, in my career, and just knowing that, hang on, someone's been in, as my mum or my brother borrowed something. And then I would go and ask them, say, I don't mind you borrowing my things, but could you ask? And then I can go and get them for you, or know that what's gone, rather than you just taking, because that kind of makes me feel like on edge a little bit, that someone's been in and taken something without asking. And so my mother was quite good at that. She would move things around on the pretext of, oh, I was just tidying and dusting. And no, it was being nosy and looking at what I was doing. So that sort of spatial awareness and the visual awareness of it was something that I just had. This one of my traits, I suppose. Call it an ability if you like, but it's just the way that I am. It's the way that I view the world is very visually, and I take things in very visually. And I was wondering whether anyone on the call had similar experiences of how they see things. You're on mute, Chris.
Yes, I am. Well done. I can't say that I'm particularly tidy. I'm probably quite untidy, but I do know where everything is. So, an example would be, I used to keep a notebook, almost like a daily diary, but it was just a note of things that happened, write down everything that happened in meetings, things that were important, things to do. And I never numbered the pages. I'd put dates on them. But if I wanted to find something, I'd remember where it was. So I could almost visualize which page it was on. Even if it was weeks or months ago, I'd know which part of the book I'd written it in and could almost flick straight to it. So I think that sort of is in line with what you're saying. I also, I can lay my hand on things quite quickly, you know, things that I've placed, as long as they're not moved, I can go back to them straight away. But if I'm looking for something that someone else has placed, I can walk right by it, even if it's in plain sight.
Yeah, I had the same thing. With some of the work I did, we would have an awful lot of information. Some roads jobs, we would have dozens and dozens of boxes of information. And so we had to make sense of it all and file it, organize it. And that was just a joy to me, was someone saying to me, see those 10 boxes on the floor over there? Go and make sense out of it, find out what there is. And that was like, yes, you know, I could get stuck into it. I could get my teeth into it. And I could find out what was in there, and I could file it, I could organize it, I could number the boxes, I could take certain bits out that were more important and put them on shelves behind me, and all those sorts of little itty-bitty things that you do so that you understand what you have. And yeah, that was an absolute joy to me, someone saying, can you go and sort out all this stuff? It's too much for us to deal with, you know, and that's what I love doing. Damien, have you any thoughts on any observations on that sort of thing?
I suppose at home, I'm also not tidy at all. Although I could have something, if something I've had could be for a long time, and then someone takes it, I'll notice immediately as if there's a space, something wrong. And then at work, I tend to be known as the person who files everything and can find any document that anyone has lost, because if someone sends a document around and I receive it as part of the group, I normally tend to then find a place to file it. And so people who have lost their documents, their first point of call will be to ask me, have I seen that? I normally find things.
Yeah, I remember particularly when I first met Andrew, he was on a committee of writers at one point, and he had a library of notes on meetings and minutes and things that were going to happen, and it was just astounding, absolutely astounding, the information that this man can collate for anything. But physically, not just on computer, physically.
Yeah, I like you said there, I know where things are. You know, if you were to say to me, where's the third draft of that book you wrote 2 years ago, I would just go straight over there to the second shelf down, first on the left, and there it is. And I would just be able to pick it out, and I would know exactly where it is. And I actually make summary files when I write. Novels, I'll have a file called Chapter Summaries, where it's literally a series of bullet points, maybe 3, 4, or 6 or 7 bullet points of what happened in the chapter. You know, Dave and Sue met and had their first kiss at the cinema. Dave tripped off the curb and broke his leg. Sue's mum not happy about something. Just very short little highlights of what is in the chapter, so that when I'm on the bus or I'm sitting watching television and I suddenly get that, did David do that or did Susan do that? I would be able to know that that's when they first met, was in chapter 2, because that's when they had their first kiss at the cinema. And I just enjoyed being able to have that sort of recall. I'm just wondering whether anyone else has sort of similar experience of that.
Recall's far easier if I've written things down. Absolutely, that's a fact for me. Trying to remember things just for the sake of remembering them doesn't work. But I remember what I've written, where, the shape of it. It's almost like a picture rather than a memory.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the same. If I write a lot of lists down and notes, if I haven't written something down, I find it easy to forget. But if I've written it down, then I don't tend to forget. So
yeah, I'm always making notes on things and making lists of things, and then going back to them and ticking them off and checking them. And one of the other benefits of having this sort of visual appreciation for what's around you is looking at patterns. And there are some people who are absolutely ideally suited at looking at financial fraud investigation or insider trading, because they can see patterns in numbers. They can see screens and screens and screens of numbers, and they'll be able to point at that there. So you see that there, and everyone's going, what? But they will be able to know just by that sequence of numbers, and then the sequence of numbers 10 rows above it, or the sequence of numbers 10 rows below it, that there's the pattern, there's the trend, there's the piece of fraud or the insider trading, there's the activity going on. And that being able to spot patterns, I find absolutely fascinating. I can't do that. I can see patterns in numbers sometimes, but the nitty gritty of screens and screens of numbers and someone just or other data and just picking out, that's the one that's wrong. I find that absolutely fascinating, that someone can be apparently just not really concentrating on what they're doing. They're not even necessarily looking straight at it. And then suddenly, boom, that one line, that one series of numbers is out of sequence, or is repeated every 200 lines or whatever. And I find it absolutely fascinating that they can do that. And they make people like that are very good in those fields, and also in the gaming industry. Some people on the spectrum are very intense gamers. They really do get into gaming and World of Warcraft and these MRPG games that they play. And actually they know how to do the coding. They're that inclined, they're that wired to be able to work out the coding. And so coding companies and gaming companies actually seek out people on the spectrum for exactly that reason, because they understand what it looks like to a user. They can see the visual and hear the interface as how it looks and plays, and how intense and how active, and all the keeping the intensity up. But they understand the behind the screen work as well, as how it all fits together, and they use them for that. And they see these patterns, and I think it's fascinating that they can do that, because they know what the end user wants. And so as an end user themselves, they can see what they would know what they would want, and so they can instigate that and program that into the gaming devices. I think it's
interesting though that it's not just people who are on the spectrum who are quite good at that. We all have a capacity for it, which is why we're on a spectrum, not this is the block here and there is an end and nobody else can do that. And one of the things that I actually can't resist when it comes around, because I have to keep doing it, is one of the memes on a certain social media platform that has, can you find the number 8? And all it is rows and rows of small 9s. And you have to find it. You have time limits to when you can find it. And I was looking at it the other night there, and I thought, oh, there it's there. And it was like 5 seconds. It took me longer to read the question than it did to find the number 8 in there. And I was thinking about it. And I think a long time ago when I was training in NLP, I was taught that we sort for difference. But there is only a certain section of society that sorts for difference. And many people sort for familiarity. They sort for the same. So there's a place for everyone to do it. It's just that some are a bit more energetic about it, shall we say?
That's an interesting one, Leslie, because I enjoy those memes as well. But there's one that I can't get, and it is infuriating me. It's the one with the pictures of all the owls, and you have to find the cat, and I can't find the cat.
I haven't seen that one. You're going to have to send it to me.
If you ever see it, I'll see if it's on my feed. But it's just a picture of dozens and dozens of owls.
Because coincidentally enough, just before we started recording, I found the cat.
Yes.
I will always find the cat.
And there's this cat, and there's supposed to be a cat in this picture. And I can do those ones of, looking for the M in all the N's and looking for the 6 in the 9s. I can sometimes get those in a fraction of a second or 1 or 2 seconds, as quick as that. But I am really infuriated that I cannot find this cat in this picture of owls. So if someone can find it and tell me where it is, that would be much appreciated. I really would never
So
need to know
do you
that.
guys do anything like that for fun? Do you know? No?
I've seen a few of those where you have to pick out, and the last one was 7 people and 1 cat. It was things these pop up on Facebook, but I tend not to like them, because if I stop and look at them, if I don't find them, I'll be annoyed. But I tend to see them, what the difference quickly, but I tend not to like them for some reason. I dislike all those sort of things where you've got to pick out an 8 or pick out there's something about them that attracts me, but I don't like it. So I'm not sure why.
Does it make you feel uncomfortable?
Yes, I think it makes me feel uncomfortable. For some reason.
Yeah,
I don't know
what about
why.
you,
But
Chris?
Yeah, in what context uncomfortable? I'm intrigued by this, if you don't mind.
Maybe a little bit annoyed because I can't see the reason for doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just
I can't see a purpose, but how it does anything positive. Maybe that's why. Maybe it's silly, but
No, it's like when Andrew was explaining earlier on about how it feels when people move his stuff. Basically, it's a case of, I think you described it to me once, like your skin was crawling because you couldn't understand why someone would do that. Number one, and number two, it was really annoying because you had set your space so that should you have to come out in the dark, you would know where everything was and you wouldn't bump into things.
Yeah.
And that was a big one because we had moved some furniture about as a joke.
I was just thinking of that. Yeah, go on.
And I thought I was doing him a favor and think, oh, this will be fun. We'll change the room around a bit. You know, women, we do that. And he came in and his face was an absolute picture. He was fuming. And I could tell he was bursting for the other person to leave the room so he could let go. But yeah, so how uncomfortable do things like that make you, Chris? Or not?
Not particularly. I don't look for the games and things. I've not seen the memes that you're talking about, but I don't think I'd see any particular point in them. I do see patterns and differences really quickly. You know, probably very annoying to other people how quickly I spot a spelling mistake in a document. But I do a lot of work with standards, and I'm working through something at the moment, and I can see the patterns in the requirements and relate them to each other, even if it's multiple lines or pages before. I can read something and think, you know, that's the same requirement. I'll link those two together. Yet the originator of the document didn't. And that, you know, I find it strange that they didn't, but those connections I can see really quickly. So it helps me to analyze requirements and write procedures and processes for them.
I'm fascinated by that because just being able to realize that you've read something before, it may have been earlier in the day or the day before, and you've immediately picked up on, actually that's similar to what I just read, and you can go back and relate the two. I think that's fascinating. I get that with the writing that I do, because I'll realize that I might be saying the same thing that I said before, so I have to to change what I'm doing or move the scene into a different area so that I'm not repeating what I've said before. But
you think of a clever phrase or saying to put into a piece of text, and you think, actually no, and you look back and you've used it somewhere else, and you think, I can't repeat that. It makes you feel uncomfortable that you're doing the same thing again.
It's a diagnostic process as well. It's the basis of a diagnostic process. You collate information and you see certain symptoms in different animals or people, and basically then you build a picture. So it's almost like seeing the story. So you're collating the differences in wellness or illness, and then taking it and going, which part of the body, and it's almost like a jigsaw puzzle. And so you put it all together and say, oh, right, that's what makes that. So this is what to expect next. But when it's repeated, then you're thinking to yourself, wow, so we have a little epidemic here then, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think it has a broad spectrum, excuse the pun, of usage as far as looking at patterns and systems analysis and different things. Is just a different way of our brains working with the data that we have.
One of the things that I realize I'm good at is spotting other people's typos in books, but not my own, because I know what it's
I do that for you.
I know what it's supposed to say, so I can immediately see. But did you know in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, there's a double space on about page 78? The number of times that book has been reviewed and edited by editors and reprinted and so on, and someone still hasn't spotted the double space.
Probably to do with the justification.
I just happened to, I was cursory looking through it, and it was like it had a big red marker pen around it going double space, and I spot these things in other people's writing, but I don't spot them in my own very well, and so I have to read them through carefully and slowly and limit myself to how much I do. If I think I'm going to try and do this big section, I'll speed read it too quickly. So I have to slow myself down by doing it in smaller chunks and concentrate more closely on those smaller chunks. But we always find that the best editing we do on an email is about 10 seconds after you've hit send.
Always.
Yeah, and if it's one of those drunk send emails, then you really shouldn't have sent it at all.
Yeah.
I find the ability to sort of pattern match and to link things together and simplify outcomes is a blessing and a curse. For me, it's perfect logic and it makes sense, and I feel as though I've done really good work. But many other people just do not understand it. They couldn't have achieved the same outcome, but when it's placed in front of them, they sort of see it as trivial and obvious. But it would have been because I did it. It wouldn't have been had they tried to do it themselves. So sometimes the good work that you do is sort of its value is diminished by the simplicity that you can put in by creating these linkages and patterns.
Yeah,
I think a lot of the time that simplicity has got a bad name, because when something is simplified, when somebody sees something and it looks so easy when they do it, and you try and do it, and you suddenly realize that there's a lot more to it than meets the eye, and that's the situation. It's almost a laziness, because if it's simple, then it must be. It can't be that important, because if it's that fast, then it can't be that. It's got to be lengthy and involved to be important. Otherwise, we wouldn't have all these big words.
Yeah, I had similar experiences at work as a geologist, reading other people's reports, reading other people who are senior to me, and there were two of them in particular. Oh, one of them, he loved his verbosity. He just absolutely loved prattling on and on and on, never getting to the point. But it's as though he was justifying his fees and justifying his existence by having this verbose, lengthy, wordy, convoluted thing. And I would despair sometimes, because they were critical of my reports, and sometimes they were right. They were critical of my reports because I was too concise. I didn't put enough detail in. Just exactly what you were saying there, Chris. You got to the hub of it and you summarized it in a concise form of words that did what it said on the tin, without having to have three extra pages of translation and description, because it didn't need it. And sometimes they picked me up on it, and I would despair that this is concise. It says what we need to say. Does it need to have all this additional flowery language? And I remember one instance. I was working at a consultant's in Tyne and Wear, near Newcastle, and as usual, you write a report and it's given to one of your colleagues to review. And this chap happens to have been that was reviewing it, happens to have someone they did my master's with. So I knew his work, I was reasonably familiar with his work. And I just happened to go past his desk when he was reviewing my report. And he had done one page, and he must have picked up, and I'm not exaggerating, 300 corrections. Virtually every line, there was 2 or 3 or 4 corrections or changes. And I looked at it and I thought, what on earth's going wrong? You know, not trying to be big-headed about it, but no one does that to my reports. I can accept that you might want to rephrase something, or there might be a typo, but 300 comments on one page, that's just not right. And I actually had to go and have a word with my boss, who I was working for, and I said, I don't want to prejudge things and jump into things, but I just happened to have noticed Sandy's reviewing my report, and I saw why he'd done so many corrections. He said, don't worry, we're used to it, I'll deal with it. And I never heard from him ever again about it. He was happy with my report, and we dealt with any minor corrections that needed to be done. But it's as though he had to go through the process of this other person reviewing it before he would then overrule most of his changes. So it was an interesting situation, but it did get my back up. It did get my back up that this one incident of someone making 300 red pen marks across one page of my work. Yeah, I thought, wow, that was a surprise. That one took me by surprise. That one, yeah.
What other things do you guys focus on? Damien, what is it that you find, do you really attach importance to visual focus, or are you more relaxed about it?
I suppose, yes, I suppose visualization and simplification, well, to make things look logical. Like, for example, like last week I was dealing with multiple standards from customers and turned them into a protocol for a reaction to micro contamination of salad products. And you've got to read through these documents, which are all pretty long. And sometimes I wonder why you need a whole page when it can be summarized in one Excel line. And so I tend to be good at bringing all that information together and simplifying it into one table that says that between all the customers, they want this. So in the end, we're going to do we're going to take the strictest option and summarize it. So, but I like to have things visualized, and so that it makes, in a way that it makes sense to me. I don't like a lot of long language, long sentences. My emails all seem to be made up of bullet points.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. I was always making tables of summary tables of what I was finding at work, just because it made it easier to summarize in one table rather than 10 sheets of paper. You could see how everything related to each other in this table, and it was far easier for me to just look at that and know what was on that table and what it represented very, very quickly. Yeah.
I think it comes into things like map reading as well, because you just love a map, don't you?
Oh yeah. I could talk for hours about maps. The first edition Ordnance Survey maps at 25" to the mile. If you've never seen one, I recommend that when COVID's over, you go to your local library in the nearest big city where you live, and you say, you want to go to the map room, you want to look at the 25" to the mile map, first edition. It'll be about 1850 or thereabouts.
Oh, what have I done?
And look at the quality and the detail. They've even the rivers are watercolor painted blue by hand. Oh, maps, I love maps. I could lose myself in a map room just looking at old maps. I find them fascinating.
That's an interesting way of putting it. Losing yourself in a map.
Oh, absolutely.
I understand that, though.
I want to use that in an NLP coaching thing at one point. That's going to be good.
Be my guest.
That's my next ad.
But they're so visual, and the detail, and I could get really excited about looking at maps. Yeah, definitely.
I don't know about you guys,
Yes,
but
I agree.
when it comes to that, when we're going anywhere, or we used to go places, Andrew would have the map taken out, and I would be sitting there saying, I don't want a map. I don't do maps. I want it written down. And when you get to this junction, you will go there. And, you know, because that's how my brain works. That's how I work. If I have a map, I have to turn it around the right way so that I know exactly where I'm going. Because I'm a woman and I don't have that much testosterone hanging about my brain for spatial awareness and things. Although I do have more than most. So I'm spatially aware in a lot of things that are, you know, danger proof kind of things, like how big is that dog? How small is that kennel? And am I going to get out in time kind of thing? That spatial awareness, definitely. When it comes to maps, not so much. Don't really get it. Then I'm dyscalculate. So, I mean, do you have trouble with that with your partners? Do your partners tend to be less inclined to be map readers? Does it cause arguments?
Sometimes.
I saw you laugh when I said it, when turning it out the other.
Why would you need to do that?
I do that. I do that.
Well, it's how I can't see myself unless I can't see how it works if it's upside down. If I can visualize it, it's like once I get a route in my head, it doesn't matter which road I take, I will get to the end result. However, put it on a piece of paper and show me all these kind of numbers, and I think it's the numbers that possibly make it go screwy for me. And I have to actually turn it around so that I can physically see myself. And that's the visualization part, see myself and see where the road is going, because I'm traveling that way. So it's a correlation between the two.
Interesting.
But yeah, it's probably a girl thing.
No, not necessarily. I think it just, I think it's fascinating, maps and looking at things like that. Well, we're almost coming up to the end, and I just wanted to mention that I have now put all of the videos to all of these sessions on my YouTube channel, and I'm going to hit the chat, because I am going to copy the link to my YouTube channel there, and for anyone to go and look.
Well, actually, it's your YouTube channel now too, because you're on it.
Yes, exactly. So all of the previous recordings are on there. There's an introduction, a 2-minute introduction for those that haven't been on and just want an idea of what I'm talking about. But feel free to subscribe and like any of the videos or the channel. I'd appreciate it if you would do that, just to help me raise my profile and get the word out to it, so that we can encourage more people to come onto the calls each week. But thank you for that. That's really fascinating. So that's the call. If you haven't fathomed out how to save the chat, drop me an email or a LinkedIn message, and I'll send you the link. But so that's
the 3 dots at the bottom right-hand corner next to the smiley face.
Yep.
Put your cursor on there and it'll say save chat.
Yeah.
And it'll give you a little Zoom thing.
And it saves it as a text document, so it's no size of file at all. So that's us talking about visual skills. I think I could talk about visual skills and maps and drawings for much longer, but that's all we have time for today. So thank you all for coming along. It's been a pleasure, and hopefully to see you again next week, where I do know what next week's topic is, and it has just gone straight out of my head. It is change management. We're going to look at change management next week. So that's an interesting one for me. So hopefully we can come up with some things that will be helpful to those people who work with others, which is one of my challenges. So see you all next week.
Okay. Cheers.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.